All right, so this one might be a little controversial, especially in the realm of spirituality and healing and wellness, but I think it's an important one to talk about. So here goes. If you've participated in these circles, you've probably heard the concept of the inner child. And I want to pause right there because unless you have an actual literal child living inside of you, like you would if you were pregnant, a concept is what the inner child ultimately is, right? It's an idea or a belief, not a flesh and blood reality, unless you're pregnant or are a kangaroo. And spiritual or healing concepts can be helpful sort of at the front end of resolving suffering, but honestly, not for long. And not if we're talking about the true cessation of suffering, which of course means resolving emotional repression. So why is this the case? Because concepts, beliefs, and ideas, even ones about inner children, are where we hide to avoid facing the emotions that we're most afraid to face. Let me give you an example from my own experience. I did inner child work for a while, probably 4 or 5 years, when I was in ACA, which is Adult Children of Alcoholics. And it was relatively helpful. It taught me to be more gentle and compassionate with myself. But there was one thing that I noticed that in hindsight seems strange. My inner child, or young Dan, was always either scared, hurt, or sad, or some combination of. And he always needed comforting, understanding, and love. Ideally from me, but also from other people if they were down to give it. And so the strange thing that I started to notice was that no matter how much love I or others gave him, A, it felt like getting high, B, it wouldn't last, and C, there was never enough. And so eventually I stopped doing inner child work because it felt like smoking pot or something, right? Like I would get high and then I would come down and then I would need to get high again. It was like being in the cycle of addiction. And so I started to get curious about that. And as Scott and I were developing KI's emotional repression work, we started to realize something about the cycle of addiction, no matter what you're using. You're doing so in order to avoid buried emotions that you don't know that you have. And so I thought back to my time in ACA and I asked myself, what emotion or feeling was missing from your inner child's experience? Scott said, was it anger? And I thought, yeah, but I'm not angry and neither is my inner child. To which he replied, so says every person who has buried, repressed, unconscious anger in their body. If we're an anger repressor, we're going to be the last to know that we repress anger because it's repressed. And here's what's even more fascinating and powerful. The concept of the inner child was keeping me from recognizing that. So I challenged it. I said, I don't have an inner child. And immediately the body said, yes, I do, in the form of a contraction. So I asked this, why do I need to believe that I do? And the contraction in my belly, and I swear this is what its voice sounded like, said this, so I don't get fucking angry. Holy shit, I've been using spiritual and healing concepts and beliefs to avoid even acknowledging the root of suffering in my body, which was the buried anger that I didn't know about that created the need for love and that created the need to believe that I had an inner child. And this is why we challenge beliefs so much in KI, our own and others, because they get in the way. They reinforce emotional repression and suffering by keeping us out of reality. And here's the really mind-blowing piece. We all know this, right? We all know that we don't actually literally have an inner child. Just like we all know that our first names aren't actually our first names, right? They're just words and concepts. And yet people argue for it and defend their beliefs, ideas, concepts, and stories because it keeps them safe in denial and in emotional repression and suffering. So if you'd like to start dropping your concepts, beliefs, ideas, and stories and resolving your emotional repression and suffering, tap the link in the caption of the bio.